Hello, welcome. Good afternoon to everyone. Whether you're watching us live or watching the replay later, I'd like to welcome you to the Green Wheels webinar series. My name is Daphne Dixon, and I'm so excited to be here with all of you today. So today is our Green Wheels webinar on municipal fleets. So just so you know, this webinar series is part of a much larger event called the Green Wheels Expo, hosted by Sustainable Fairfield. So our event, the Green Wheels Expo, started on Saturday, September 26th. And we started off with an interview with one of our task force members, Jim Motivali, and he interviewed Carbuff J. Leno. If you'd like to watch that replay of that interview, you can watch it on sustainablefairfield.org. And then on Sunday, we had an electric car parade, and we partnered with the Electrical Vehicle Club of Connecticut. It was fantastic. We had 30 EVs. We started in Westport. We drove to Fairfield. It was a wonderful, wonderful parade. There was people along the way cheering us, with masks, of course, and it was just fantastic. And then on Monday, we kicked off our virtual EV showcase. So if you're looking for an EV, if you want to purchase an EV, and you're looking to find models that are here in Connecticut, all you have to do is go to sustainablefairfield.org, and you can look at our virtual EV showcase, and you can see all the models that are available right here in Connecticut. And I want to thank our task force members who put that together. It's just amazing. Also on Monday, we kicked off our Green Wheels webinar series, and we started the webinar series off with a conversation around how is Connecticut going to reach 125,000 EVs by 2025. So it was great to have Tracy Babbage from Connecticut Deep and Josh Kirstenbaum of Maritime Chevy talking about all the EVs that they have on their lot ready to sell. And we also heard from Anthony Chirolas about the cheaper program. And then on Tuesday, we switched gears and we went over to Bridgeport and talked with Doug Holcomb, and he was with us virtually to talk about the electric transit buses in Bridgeport that are here. There's 2 Proterra electric transit buses, and more are on the way. If you'd like to watch any of those, both of those webinars, you can go to sustainablefairfield.org and you can watch those replays. And then yesterday, we went in and we talked with Joe Gwynn of Motor Power Systems, and he shared with us information on how businesses can go EV. So it was great, and again, that also is on our website. So it's been a great start to our webinar series. We're excited for today, and tomorrow is our finale, and tomorrow we'll be doing a site visit at White Plains School District, and we will be going behind the scenes and checking out the Lion Electric school bus. There's going to be representatives from utilities, from Lion Electric, from the school bus provider company. It's just going to be fantastic. That'll be a live broadcast from 11 to 12, and then the replay will be at 1 o'clock. So we hope you can join us for that as well. I'd like to thank our sponsors of our Green Wheels Expo, and we'd like to thank Maritime Chevy, William Levy Architects, Techno, Sustain, Electric Vehicle Club of Connecticut, Mo Green, Pure, Connecticut, Greater New Haven Clean Cities, and Connecticut Southwestern Clean Cities, and Live Green. So today's webinar, the topic is, as we were saying before, is how can municipalities start taking steps to go green, how to transition our municipal fleets to go green. So that's what we're talking about today. So we have there's a program, the Municipal EV Readiness Toolkit 12-week program. And this program it started September 17th. It runs through December 17th. And it's open to community leaders and municipal decision makers in an effort to help provide tools and resources so that municipalities can make that step to electrify their fleets. So we started Module 1 off with an orientation and an overview. Last week, we delved into electric school buses, and we really talked about how, the steps that need to go into that. And then today, of course, we are talking about municipal fleets. So a little bit more about the program is when we started this program, we wanted to make sure that everyone who participates is operating under sort of a set of shared agreements. So we're all really in here to support each other and to really help all of us learn how we can how we can all transition to EVs. So we support each other. The participants that are in this, this program commit to doing the tasks and the course reading for each module, so that at the end of the 12 weeks, every town that participates will have steps that they can take in 2021 to really move forward. So let's take a look at what we did last week. So last week, again, we talked about the electric school buses. And so the action step for the folks who are involved in the program was to start really making sure and building your electric school bus team. So we went through some steps on how to do that, and we really appreciate the participants who turned in their homework, and we're looking forward to the rest of the participants who will be turning that information in by October 26th. Everyone who does do their homework and participates in the program, for each module you participate and complete the tasks, you do get a certificate of completion. So then we followed up that action step with a coaching call that was this week. And so the way the program works is every week there's a module with the course training, and then we have a follow-up coaching call for those who want additional support and resources. So we really want to thank Fairfield, Hamden, Manchester, New Haven, and North Haven for joining us on that coaching call, and for their commitment to really identify their decision maker in their school district, and to encourage them to move forward with electric school buses. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to concentrate on Module 3, on this week's module, and on the subject of our webinar for today. So that is our Municipal Fleet Action Plan. So for this module, there are course materials. For those of you who are participating in the program, you've received most of these course materials, and if you haven't received all of them, some you'll get as a follow-up from today. For those of you who are joining us who don't know about the program up until now, you can let us know that you'd like to join, and you can still participate. There's still room for those of you who want to participate. We have over 100 participants in the program to date, and we have over 40 municipalities participating in the program, but there's room for many more. So this week's tool and task is to perform a fleet inventory. And then really the goal of this is to learn how to perform a fleet inventory, and then in 2021, then to go forward and to actually go forward with a fleet analysis, a fleet replacement plan, and to start applying for grants. So this is a very action-oriented program. So unlike most webinars where you come and you learn and you take notes and you use that, this is really a program where we provide participants with information, and then we look forward to the participants really digging in and doing the homework, and really taking all the information that we're providing and the resources and the energy of the group to propel them forward into creating an electric vehicle plan for their municipality. So I would like to turn it over to Andrea McCarthy, and she's going to talk a little bit about, and more specifically, this week's action step. Thank you, Andrea.
Great, thank you. So this week's action step is going to be creating a fleet inventory. You'll receive the Excel document that we've created for a template in the follow-up email later today, and we'll have until October 30th to submit it, and we'll go over how to fill it out today. And then we'll have a coaching call next Tuesday, October 6th at 3 p.m. For any additional support that municipalities may need to fill that out. So now we'll go over what the fleet inventory looks like and how to complete it. So this may be a little difficult to see, but as we go through, this is going to help centralize to start the plan for a fleet transition. And some municipalities may already have a centralized inventory, and that's great, and they can keep working with that. But we wanted to provide a template for those municipalities that may not have a centralized inventory, or may have it an inventory by department or some other kind of method. But this is going to help centralize everything. We also, this is an inventory that can go work with all vehicles, so light, medium, and heavy duty vehicles. You'll also find a tab for off-road vehicles. At this time, we're only going to focus on the on-road vehicles, but feel free to start filling out your off-road as you feel fit. It's also a customizable template here. So you'll see fuel usage. You may not use all of these fuels. That's fine. You can customize this to fit your needs. We also have the inputs that we have, or the data that you're going to input are also what the inputs that you'll need for the AFLEET tool, which Andy will be talking about later on in this webinar. And then, so if we go through the examples here, first you'll pick your vehicle type. There's a drop-down menu, so you can choose from that predetermined drop-down, but you can also write in vehicles that you may need to add in. You'll have your make and your model of your vehicle. You'll have your model year or your engine model year. You'll input your annual vehicle mileage for that vehicle. You'll have your fuel economy. And as you can see, there are some acronyms in this sheet. We have a tab that will describe what each of those mean, so that you can get what all of these acronyms mean. But basically for that fuel economy, there are several different acronyms. They all just mean fuel economy. And then you'll put in your vehicle, the fuel the vehicle uses, and then you'll have your annual vehicle or annual fuel usage that you'll input. So if it's a gasoline vehicle, then you'll put that under the gasoline column. If you have a propane vehicle, then you can put the propane under the LPG. And if you have a biofuel vehicle that uses two different kinds of fuel, then you'll split it up into the two different types of fuel. And then to finish it off, you'll have a place to put the purchase price for the vehicle and the remaining lifetime years, so that you can start looking at your total cost of ownership. So then once you have your vehicle inventory, we'll look at what the vehicle, what it is you should be looking at for vehicle feasibility for flipping to electric. So next slide, please. Great, thank you. So with this, when you're looking at your vehicles, you want to make sure that they're going to work for electric vehicles and that they're going to meet your needs. So telematics is a tool that you can use to help collect data. It's a device you can put in your car, and it'll help gather some of this data. Otherwise, you can also kind of collect this on your own. But what you're going to want to look at is, will the electric vehicle meet your driver's needs? So you want to make sure it has the range you need, the use. So are you carting people? Are you carting cargo? Do you have enough space for all of that? And is the application, do you need four-wheel drive? And then the next step is kind of looking at what will the lifetime costs of the vehicle. So you can look at the operational costs, maintenance and fuel, your total cost of ownership, so how long you have the vehicle, and also look at the variable costs. So that's going to be your fuel prices and the vehicle prices. And then you want to make sure you have the infrastructure installed where you want it, or where those vehicles are. So you want to look at where, usually if it's a vehicle that's going to be parked overnight, where are those vehicles parking? Or if they don't park overnight, where's their longest dwell time that they're able to charge? So you want to put those chargers where that longest dwell time is. And then you want to look at the impact on demand charge. So this is the fuel pricing. And you'll have the impact on demand charge being related to the time of day or the seasonality or your level of deployment. So that would include how many levels of, how many chargers you have, and then what is that level of charge? How much electricity is it drawing? And then I think what we have next is kind of going over the next critical aspect is the infrastructure component. So if we could have the next slide, please. Thanks. So for the infrastructure process, there's many steps in order to get your infrastructure in place. And it may take a longer time than it will to order and purchase your vehicles. So you want to make sure that you start planning your infrastructure well ahead of when you start purchasing your vehicles. And you also want to bring your utility in early because they're going to be a great asset to help you find where that electricity service is and where your demands are. And then on the right side of the screen is a schematic of what the city of Denver had given as their steps for electrification. And the blue arrows at the top and the bottom relate to vehicle procurement. And the brown arrows, so those 5 arrows, I believe, in the middle are all related to the infrastructure planning. So that kind of just goes over in Cliff Notes versions what you're looking at when you're looking at a fleet transition. And next, Kelsey will be talking about the roadmap, the EV roadmap that Connecticut has made.
Hey everybody, so just to give a quick overview about the Connecticut Deep EV roadmap. So this roadmap was published back in April and made certain recommendations about what we can be doing in Connecticut to move towards electrification. And so here, what we're trying to do is look at these recommendations and figure out how we can implement them throughout our towns and throughout our modules. So for your municipal fleet, one of the recommendations made by Connecticut Deep was to use telematics systems to get some baseline data on your fleets as they are now and use this to figure out where electric vehicles might be applicable instead. So Andrea kind of went over how you can use telematics systems and how you can use that to figure out where electric vehicles might be a good fit for your own fleet. We also took the recommendation to use a total cost of ownership, a model to see if an EV purchase might be a good fit for your community. A lot of times the total cost of ownership ends up being closer to the initial price that you would have in a typical vehicle. So by looking at the total cost instead of just the upfront purchase price, this can be a lot more effective.
Awesome. All right, Andrea and Kelsey, thank you so much for that very valuable information. I'm sure we all really appreciate learning all of those things. And I'm just delighted and thrilled and so excited to introduce Andy Burnham, Principal Environmental Scientist for Argonne National Laboratory. Andy has developed this incredible AFLEET tool, and we are just so honored that he took time out of his very busy and hectic schedule to join with us today at the Green Wheels webinar series on municipal electrification. And Andy, welcome, and the stage is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daphne. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. And I've known a lot of people on the call on the Clean Cities side for a long time, and I know they do great work, and I hope I can provide some information that's valuable and leave enough time. You know, I'm sure everybody gets PowerPointed to death in many ways, but leave enough time for question and answer. And if you have anything that's related to, you know, what I present or just other things that you think of, I'd be happy to try to answer your questions. So I will hopefully share my screen so you can see my slides. And do you see my slides now? Is that
Yes, we do.
Great. Okay. So I'll be talking about the costs and benefits of electric vehicles, how to examine those with using the AFLEET tool that I developed. Andrea kind of talked about some of the pieces that go into some of the calculations. I'll kind of give a higher level explanation. I'm not going to dig down into the details because I think oftentimes, you know, it can get a little overwhelming, but especially the Clean Cities folks on the call, like they've worked with the tool, they know where the data goes, so you don't have to worry too much about kind of the nitty gritty, how does it function, but you know, what kind of data do I need to make an informed decision is really kind of, you know, what we're talking about.
Andy, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to let you know it's showing the presenter mode.
Yeah,
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. Let me see if I can make sure I am getting a appropriate thing you can see. Okay, let me try one more time.
Yep.
One more. Is it better now?
Yes.
All right, there we go.
Thank
Back on
you.
track. Thank you. No, thank you. So what I'll talk about in the presentation is talk about the AFLEET tool, how it was developed, kind of some of the data behind it, and what are some of the key issues you may want to think about as you're looking at electric vehicles or even other alternative fuels. I'll hit on some key updates that might be related to what you're interested in, particularly EVs, and then go through a quick case study that will highlight how that tool can be used to kind of do some comparisons and look at a specific fleet, how you can understand some of the costs and benefits. So before I get into AFLEET, I'll plug where I work for and what we do at Argonne National Lab. So Argonne National Lab is one of the Department of Energy's many national labs, and we're a kind of full science. So we do basic energy research, and we have advanced computing. We have kind of fundamental science, as well as things related to transportation and batteries. So that's kind of the area that I am in. Even in our group, though, we have people who are doing engine research and battery fundamental testing, vehicle testing. We have a group in the lower right-hand corner that was just recently opened. The Resell Center is looking at second use, how you kind of deal with a battery after it's done its first use, and do you put it in, can you take it and put it in a new vehicle? Can you recycle it? What can you do with the battery after its first use? And then up on the top right corner is the analysis team, and that's the team I'm a part of. And we do environmental and economic analysis of these vehicle and fuel technologies to try to understand what are the, again, costs, benefits of using those technologies. So at Argonne, we have the EV Smart Grid Interoperability Center. So this is kind of one of the real world testing that we're doing that I think is, kind of interesting. They developed the Smart Energy Plaza, just basically so on site we can charge electric vehicles that are part of Argonne's fleet, as well as also personal vehicles that are owned by Argonne employees. And they're doing testing, looking at a lot of different things related to managing charging to make sure the costs are as low as possible, seeing how they can potentially integrate the electricity from the solar panels to make sure you're charging the vehicles. Can you use it for buildings? There's lots of things going on, lots of interesting work being done there. We don't just have kind of light duty vehicle charging. We're looking at 1 megawatt commercial truck charging. So getting into really high power charging needed for a long haul truck. So there's work moving towards that. I have more experience kind of on the high power for light duty. So this kind of, you may have heard it called kind of extreme fast charging, or things kind of beyond what we see today. 350 kilowatt, 400 kilowatt charging, so that you could charge your electric vehicle in roughly the same time it takes to fuel up a gasoline car. So there's a lot of work, a lot of interest in kind of on the research side and understanding the implications of those technologies. So getting into the meat, into the tool that I developed. So I've worked for Clean Cities for the whole time I've been at Argonne, so it's been 15 plus years. And we've developed a lot of tools to help fleets and other decision makers try to understand alternative fuel vehicles. And so this latest tool, which was released now 7 years ago, has been a tool for Clean Cities coalitions like Daphne, and all the rest around the country, as well as the stakeholders who are participating in that, to try to understand some of the environmental factors, energy factors, so petroleum use, greenhouse gas emissions, air pollution, as well as costs. So we've tried to make this somewhat holistic and comprehensive so we can try to hit on some of the key points that decision makers might look at when trying to do comparisons. And we have light duty, we have heavy duty, we have 18 fuel and vehicle technologies. So we have 18 fuels specifically. I'll run through them roughly. Is like conventional, we have gasoline and diesel, we have gasoline and diesel hybrids, we have plug-in electric. So this includes like plug-in hybrids like the now gone Chevy Volt, but also, you know, fully electric vehicles. Alternative fuels like natural gas that is compressed or liquefied, CNG, LNG, propane, LPG, hydrogen, biofuels like ethanol and biodiesel. So some of the new features, which I'll go through, the first two actually are the off-road footprint calculator and the public EV charging calculator. So each year we update the tool to incorporate the latest emissions and cost data that we have. So we try to make sure we're up to date, because in many cases, especially say electric vehicles, things are changing fast. You know, even on the grid is changing quickly. So we want to look at how the grid is changing so our emissions data is good. And then also the cost of vehicles. There are new vehicles coming out, the costs are changing. We want to make sure we're up to date on that. We have two versions of the tool. We have a spreadsheet and an online version. The spreadsheet is typically how you know, many fleets want to you know, use their inventory data, copy and paste into a spreadsheet. So that's the primary kind of way we you know, do a lot of our calculations. But we also developed an online format. So people could kind of do something a little more, let's say, user-friendly, where they can kind of point and click and walk through a case, like I'll show kind of later in the presentation, and do it in a nice, easy way. We are going to release a new update this fall in the next couple months before the end of the year. So we're going to include some new updates. We're spending a lot of time on off-road, which I'll highlight shortly, but also looking at maintenance costs, which has some particular importance to electric vehicles, as was mentioned previously. So in AFLEET tool, we have a lot of different calculators, and it's, you know, for the last 7 years, it's kind of gotten bigger and bigger because we added more and more things, because people ask, like, what about this? You know, what if I want to compare this in this way? So we're like, okay, we'll add that. So you can do that. So it gets a bit, maybe a little overwhelming for new users because there's just a lot of stuff in there. But like the key two things are really the simple payback calculator and the total cost of ownership calculator, for when you want to do comparisons of new alternative fuels versus your conventional fuel, whether it's gasoline for light duty or diesel for heavy duty. So a simple payback calculator is a way to get a simple payback. You know, it takes 3 or 4 years to pay off the higher incremental costs of a electric vehicle if you have the right, you know, fuel price kind of differential and maintenance cost savings. So I'll get into that in my actual case study shortly. The total cost of ownership is very similar, but you're dealing with kind of discount rates and net present value. So it's a little more sophisticated way of doing a calculation, but it's still kind of, it's pretty similar. We've had a lot of people ask about idle reduction. So we created an idle reduction calculator that lets you look at the cost and benefits of adding idle reduction equipment versus just idling your vehicle. So this still touches on the electric side, that there are some battery electric IR equipment that will, you know, again, reduce idling. So you can look at that. Basically, you know, probably not for municipal fleets, but in certain cases, there have been some work done on police vehicle fleets to reduce their idling, and using battery APUs, auxiliary power units, to again reduce that. Some of that's kind of in the early-ish stage, but that is available, and you can do that type of calculation where you want to look at emissions and payback. The next is the on-road fleet footprint calculator and the newly developed off-road fleet footprint calculator. So what Andrea showed was really a snapshot of that. A lot of the data that Andrea needs to do her calculations are based on what we put in here. And so this is a way for a fleet to basically do a footprint and say, like, I want to know what are my emissions of the vehicles in my fleet. So if you have an inventory and you either give it to Andrea and she copies and pastes it and puts it into AFLEET, or you kind of do that process, it's, you know, trying to really understand that older vehicles are going to have different emissions than newer vehicles. So you have to copy and paste, you know, the model year, the fuel type, how many miles does it travel. All those key factors will determine what your emissions are. We've always really focused on-road, you know, highway vehicles, but there is interest on off-road from the fleet side. So thinking about, you know, some potential construction equipment, forklifts. There's different things that may be electrified. So we are trying to make sure we can understand, again, the emissions benefits of doing that. And then in the future, right now we just have emissions, but we're looking at trying to do cost analysis as well for those off-road equipment. And then the kind of final feature of the tool is this EV charging calculator. And this is probably less relevant for you fleet folks, but it is something that is becoming an important factor that people, you know, municipalities are interested in installing charging infrastructure, public charging infrastructure specifically. And there's a lot of money out there, and I'll get to that. But basically, if you want to do some you know, funding opportunity, you might have to show what are the emissions benefits of us actually putting this charging infrastructure in place, and how could that compare to some other options. So we developed that calculator specifically for that case. So I'll get into just a little bit more detail on these calculators that are new in AFLEET. So for the off-road side, we care about off-road because the air pollutant emissions can be pretty high. What this chart shows is kind of different kind of mobile source. So basically you have off-road, marine, rail, air, and heavy duty and light duty. The top two bars are light duty and heavy duty. The blue and the orange you made. Yeah, you probably don't see my mouse, but basically those are always been like the focus that, you know, typically people care about the air pollutant emissions from that. But what we see as the emission standards for like heavy trucks and light trucks, they have kind of been squeezed. So those emissions are getting lower and lower. We see that kind of the off-road becomes more important, more and more important for certain pollutants. So that's why, you know, we have to keep our eye on those kind of pieces of equipment, because typically they're regulated less stringently, and so their emissions can be pretty high. So what the off-road footprint calculator does is looks at energy use and emissions, as I mentioned. It has 12 fuel equipment technologies, so conventional, electric, and then the alternative fuels listed here: natural gas, propane, hydrogen, and the biofuels. We have 22 equipment types. We use EPA data to kind of fill in a lot of the emissions that we have here for both conventional alternative fuels. And then we also go and grab some default information to help. So if you're a fleet, you hopefully have an inventory, you know, kind of your usage, but we have some defaults there that can help, you know, if people don't have that information at hand. So things like annual, hourly usage, what's the rated horsepower, what's the equipment lifetime as well. So I'll just run through the equipment types, and some of these will be more relevant to you and some won't be. So agricultural, probably not super relevant to you guys. Airport support, again, not. But starting construction, probably not as well, but maybe you might have some things that in this list, like loaders, rubber tire loaders are pretty prevalent. Then getting to industrial, things like forklifts or sweepers might be some things that you have, or you might have some lifts in your fleet as well, aerial lifts like scissor lifts and things like that. Here, getting to maybe things that, you know, you may have more of, lawn and garden, so various turf equipment and mowers and trimmers and snow blowers and things like that. So if you want to start looking at the emissions benefits of, you know, transitioning from gasoline versions of those or diesel versions to electric, you can start to do that with our tool. And then some recreational things. So you may have some golf carts in your fleet, you know, that you could look at the emissions benefits as you electrify. So I'll quickly go through the EV charging calculator because it's still maybe not super fleet. It's more, you know, municipal decision maker level, but there are literally billions of dollars out there for putting public electric vehicle charging out there, both from like VW settlement and then also the utilities. So the utilities are putting a lot of money out there to try to, you know, improve the public charging infrastructure. So really the question that kind of drove us to create this calculator is like, well, we could, you know, buy some low emitting vehicles. You could buy an electric vehicle specifically, or you could buy a natural gas vehicle, or you could put public charging infrastructure out. And how do you compare the two? What are the emissions benefits of the two? For a vehicle, it's more straightforward. You know, probably, you know, especially for a fleet, like we're going to travel 10,000 miles. The fuel economy is going to be 5 miles per gallon. We know the emissions of that, you know, new truck. It's more straightforward. When you put public charging infrastructure, you're dealing with the public, and you don't know how much the charging infrastructure is going to get used. So we spent a lot of time trying to answer that question, like what are the benefits of doing that? And I won't go into, you know, again, a ton of the detail on that, but the real key factor, what I try to highlight is utilization, that how much the charging station gets utilized means how much kilowatt hours, how much electricity is being dispensed. And that's how much kind of emission savings you're going to get if you compare it to something that, you know, would have been there otherwise, whether it was a gasoline car, you know, you're kind of getting rid of gasoline because you're able to drive more on your electric vehicle. It's kind of a weird counterfactual case that we have to create to really understand these benefits. But just so you know that we have kind of the level 2, the DC fast charging, we have a lot of utilization average data for different places, whether it's a general parking lot or healthcare location, so forth. And then we have I'll kind of skip through the calculation, but basically what we do is try to estimate how much power is being dispensed. Then we estimate how many miles you could drive with that power. And then we compare the miles of an electric vehicle versus the miles of a kind of counterfactual gasoline vehicle that would have driven the same miles. And we say the benefit is this minus that. So that's I don't know if we'll have a lot of questions on that, so I'll kind of skip through. But the other thing that on the update side that I think I'll kind of get to that's important, I mentioned that we update our data every year. So we have various models, Argonne models, EPA models that give us emissions data, fuel economy data. We get new fuel price data from Clean Cities, but some of these factors like purchase price and fuel prices, they'll depend on the state, and they'll depend on even the locality within that state. You know, the fuel prices in northern Connecticut versus southern Connecticut versus east-west, you know, they may differ depending where you are. So it's important to use kind of your local data when you do these calculations, especially for fuel price, because that really will drive, you know, your results. So you know, we have a lot of defaults, but, you know, using your own data is really important when you want to get a really good answer that represents, what's going to happen for your fleet. So this is the factor that I wanted to share. And I always, especially talking to fleets, I maybe poke and say, like, can we get better data? Because, there isn't a lot of public information on maintenance costs. Fleets have it. They know their costs, right? And it differs. It differs a lot by fleet because, we can pick specific vehicles here. I have a garbage truck, a step van, utility vans, and a light duty, but we have a whole swath of maintenance costs by vehicle type. But it will matter based on a lot of factors, based on your kind of cost of, maintaining your fleet internally, or do you, send a lot of your maintenance costs to third parties to do contracting to do maintenance. Do you have a lot of salt on your roads? How are the vehicles driven? All these factors, come into play. So it's hard to generalize costs, but what we try to do is like look at cost curves and understand how costs may increase as a vehicle gets older. And so there isn't a lot of data there. I would appreciate it anytime, again, I'm talking to a fleet, is like, if you guys have some good cost data and say, hey, your cost curves look wrong, would appreciate that, because we want to get better data on that. But the point of adding this was that electric vehicles are kind of being promoted as vehicles that have very low maintenance costs. And we don't have a great sense of if that's true. There is decent evidence on that. But we're trying to spend a lot of time to really dig into that, understand what the baseline gasoline, diesel maintenance costs are, and then get into, advanced vehicles so we understand them as well. So I'll move on to the case study and kind of wrap up. So when we're doing this analysis with AFLEET, the two key drivers for doing the calculations are fuel price and vehicle costs. Those are really the biggies, and maybe maintenance costs, maybe, we'll see. But what we see here is kind of a national average retail fuel price of electricity when you kind of account for vehicle efficiency versus gasoline and diesel. And obviously, gasoline and diesel is volatile, and as fleet operators, like there were years where gasoline and diesel really spiked and was causing headaches, and in the past couple of years it's dropped and it's been less of a issue, but prices go up and down. We see that with electricity, prices are very steady. We do need to account for charging infrastructure, which I'll get to next. So that's just kind of your electricity rate. But when you are installing electric vehicles and the infrastructure, you need to take into account how much the charging infrastructure costs. So we added this data into AFLEET to help make our TCO calculations more robust. And we're continuing to try to update this. So hardware costs, equipment costs are typically a little more straightforward. Installation, there can be some pretty big ranges for installation, as you may know. Do you have to break a lot of concrete and lay a bunch of new conduit to a parking lot? Or is your existing electrical service already sufficient, and you just kind of have some green field and you can put some chargers and the installation is pretty small? So that will really drive kind of some of these upfront installation costs. So you have to be real mindful of this kind of going in. And then especially as you start getting to higher and higher power charging, that gets more and more expensive for fleets. If you're able to charge overnight, that's kind of the way to go, because it's going to be kind of cheaper on the kind of infrastructure side, but also kind of on the electricity side. So you have to take into account demand charges. And so again, for municipalities and how kind of your electricity contracts are, I don't have great sense, but you do need to pay attention to those, especially for fast charging. I have I think a slide here. We were doing this work for this very high power charging, which I talked about real early in the beginning. So something like 400 kilowatt charging, so real high power. And what we see is that, demand charges kind of really get you when you don't utilize your charger very often. It becomes a really high, large factor of your electricity price. So, I was showing, well, so let's say, you have something that's 10 cents per kilowatt hour for your base rate of electricity, but then you have to amortize kind of all the hardware, the installation, and the demand charges over kind of the usage of your charger. And so you have to include those factors when coming into an electricity price. And you can see, like, when you get a bunch of utilization, your kind of cost on the right-hand side is per weird unit e-gallon, but you can think of that roughly as a gasoline gallon unit. So as long as you start utilizing the charging infrastructure, those costs will come down. And then if you don't use really high power, that again will help keep the cost down as well. So the case study that, just kind of a simple thing to walk through is for your passenger vehicle fleet, what is the, what are the factors that I need to pay attention to? So one is the incremental cost. And this will depend on subsidies in your state as well, whether Connecticut, I don't believe, has any state subsidies, but you may have federal subsidies that you can take advantage of, maybe with tax credits. Again, that's always tricky for fleets, but leasing, there's ways to do it. But basically, that's a really important factor. So I ran a couple different cases, kind of with and without some subsidies. Fuel prices, obviously, what gasoline prices are will drive a lot of your cost analysis. And then electricity too, whether you have time of use rates or not, or what your demand charges may or may not be, will be important as well. And so here are just some of the factors that I included to do this. But the point being is, I ran these cases for a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, and an electric vehicle. And this is kind of assuming really high vehicle costs. So like you're spending nearly $40,000 for an electric vehicle with no subsidies at all. Same for a plug-in, very, $35,000 with no subsidies. And then the hybrids, are relatively cheap, in comparison, that you can get something relatively cheap compared to gasoline. So you see this kind of years to pay back that incremental cost to be, lowest for hybrids. And then, kind of at basically the end of the life of your plug-in and electric vehicle. This is assuming 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And I have some error bars there, and it matters what assumptions you make, but that's, kind of in the ballpark. But once you start going to lower cost electricity and lower cost plug-in electric vehicles, so if you are able to get some subsidy on the EV or the plug-in EV, then the costs start, coming down to where they'll match maybe an electric hybrid electric vehicle. So it's in the 4 to 5, 6, 7 year time frame to get a payback. So that's kind of the idea of taking into account this total cost of ownership, all these factors. We're refining that data, but that's really important. And you can look at cases for your specific fleet, and you may drive more miles, and that might help the bottom line as well. So these are all factors that you need to take into account. And then the other things that if you are applying for grants or you have some state requirements that you need to pay attention to your emissions, what we see is that as you go to these oftentimes more expensive vehicle, you get still more environmental benefit. So it's these trade-offs between the kind of bottom line and then the environmental factors are things that we have to deal with. So what AFLEET can do is help you, understand both the costs and the environmental factors. So I'll close before opening up for questions. So Clean Cities has a lot of, resources, and Daphne and her team are kind of the fulcrum of that. The coordinators are, the people that can help you with this, but there may be some specific, documentation. The plug-in electric vehicle handbook for fleet managers could be a valuable document for you to review. We have some other resources that are kind of Argonne related. I will share these slides, but they're touching on different things about, basically putting electric vehicles in different fleet applications that, again, may help you with providing some information that could be useful. So I will stop there, and if we have time for questions, I'm happy to answer them or try to. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Andy. That was it's incredible what you're doing there, and we're so grateful for all the work you're doing there at Argonne. It looks like, let's see, in chat, is there evidence that high power DC fast chargers degrade batteries, and should they be avoided if possible for that reason? That's one question that has come in.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as a scientist, I'll say it depends. That's our wiggle way, or weasel way to get out of that. But yes, high power charging is not great for batteries. And if you don't have to high power charge, it's probably better. There is research to improve, the capabilities of batteries, but what we saw, even like kind of initially, that the Nissan Leaf and I think, the Chevy Volt to a certain respect, but basically they said, like, don't high power charge your battery all the time, or you're going to really take a hit on its battery life. As those batteries have improved generation by generation, they are making them better handle that. So whether, we have like a hard and fast rule on like how much it will impact, no. But yeah, basically, batteries don't like a ton of heat. So generating heat is not good for a battery. And high power charging can generate a lot of heat, and is something, again, you can do it here and there, but if that's your sole mode of charging, that potentially can be an issue.
Awesome. We had another question, and I'm not sure if you can answer this one or not, although you're a scientist, so I'm sure you can. Cost parity, when do we think that cost parity is going to come into play so that it's really not an issue? Is that something you've been able to do research on or have any comments on?
So I think that's the question there is on cost parity at a front end side. So kind of dealing with this incremental cost and say, hey, we're at, I don't think I have an extra zero on one of these, but is the EV the same price as the gasoline vehicle? And a lot of people are speculating that. The Department of Energy spends a lot of time trying to reduce the price, reduce the cost of batteries so we can have the same price. I have seen those analyses, and we're looking at that. There is discussion that projections, I should say, that we're 5 to 10 years away, that we're not so far away from it. But as a fleet manager, you do have to include the lifetime costs and make sure that you're understanding the maintenance potential benefits, the fuel price benefits. So, yeah, and I understand, fleets of all types are capital constrained and there's cash flow problems. So even if you can pay back in, 3 years, it's still a tough sale. So yeah, I do understand that's an issue, but, I do try to say, if you can look to a TCO, total cost of ownership, approach that's beneficial, especially when you look at EVs.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andy. We have a couple more questions coming in, but we are at the top of the hour, so we are going to wrap this up. But we see your questions in the chat, and we will get back to you with answers to those questions. So we want to thank you all so much for attending today's Green Wheels webinar. And we do want to let you know about a few upcoming trainings and additional learning opportunities. There is the White Plains site visit tomorrow, virtual. So we hope that you're able to join us for that. That should be amazing. And you can see some other events are coming up as well. Something that's new that's just announced is on October 12th for decision makers of school bus fleets. We will have a drive-in ride in person in Bridgeport for those of you who are decision makers and want to actually safely, with COVID protocols, actually ride in a Lion electric school bus. So we hope that those of you who are interested in that will join us. So we can't thank you enough for joining us here today. If you have not previously participated in our program, our Municipal EV Readiness Program, and you would like to, just contact us and we can get you into the program. And for those of you who are already participating and want a little help or a little coaching on this AFLEET tool and or help with your fleet inventory, please do join us on our coaching call coming up on this coming Tuesday from 3 to 4. Please join us and we can help support you on your EV analysis. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful day. Again, thank you so much to Andy for sharing all your wisdom and all that amazing research with us. And we will look forward to hopefully seeing you tomorrow. All right, everybody, have an electric day. Have a great day. Bye.